Real Madrid, by a number of metrics, are the biggest club in world football. Players want to play for them, hundreds of millions of people support them, and they have won more La Liga titles, UEFA Champions Leagues, and FIFA Club World Cups than any other team. They're also the most valuable football team in the world, according to Forbes, worth in excess of $6 billion, and they have topped the Deloitte Football Money League as the team with the highest revenue in world football more times than anyone else. It is hardly surprising, therefore, that Real Madrid have one of the most prolific academy systems on the planet. La Fábrica, literally the factory, churns out more talent than any other youth system in Europe, or at least, that's what the data suggests. There are more former Real Madrid academy players playing in La Liga and throughout Europe's top 5 leagues than there are players from any other academy in the world. In the last 10 years alone, the sale of academy graduates has been worth almost 400 million euros to Real Madrid, the second highest figure of any club, and constitutes a key part of their financial operation. Real Madrid's La Fábrica youth ranks, it would be easy to conclude then, is working exactly as intended. There is just one point of contention. Why doesn't it produce any truly great players? There are only 4 La Fábrica Academy graduates in the current Real Madrid first team, and only one of them, Dani Carvajal, could you even entertain the possibility of describing as a truly great player, at least in the context of Real Madrid and of Europe's elite. The last bona fide, undisputed world-class player to come through La Fábrica and break into the first team was Iker Casillas, and that wasn't even this millennium. Casillas made his Real Madrid first team debut actually on this very day in 1999, exactly 24 years ago. Since then, Real Madrid's arch-rivals Barcelona have witnessed the likes of Andres Iniesta, Sergio Busquets, Lionel Messi, Victor Valdez, Pedro, Gavi, and most recently of all, 16-year-old wonder kid Lamine Yamal, for whom the sky, it would seem, really is the limit, step up from La Masia into their first team. Around the same time as Casillas, Barcelona also had the likes of Xavi and Puyol break into their first team, meanwhile Cesc Fabregas and Gerard Piqué departed before making their Barcelona debuts, but soon returned to play a starring role. It is a curious phenomenon at one of the world's biggest clubs, with one of the best funded academies, based in a hotbed of young talent that is Madrid. So just what on earth is going on? Well, funnily enough, that's what this video is all about. So sit back, relax, and join me on a journey to the Spanish capital in an effort to figure out why exactly Real Madrid don't produce world-class players. Real Madrid's training ground, known as Real Madrid City or Ciudad Real Madrid in Spanish, is located in the Valdebebas urban development on the outskirts of Madrid. When it opened its doors in 2005, it was the largest sporting facility on the planet, and Real Madrid claim that it still is, almost 20 years on. A sprawling complex consisting of 11 training pitches, the Alfredo de Stefano Stadium, which is home to Real Madrid Castilla and Real Madrid's women's team, basketball courts, 5-a-side pitches, media suites, Real Madrid's corporate headquarters, Turkish baths, a sauna, a cinema, a gym, a games room, 3 car parks, a train station, 57 individual bedrooms, a restaurant, swimming pools, and an enormous building which winds through the middle of it all, containing individual dressing rooms for more than 12 different teams. Surrounded by arid grassland to all sides in the summer, there is a constant hum of construction work in the background, interrupted only by the bellowing sound of jet engines. Though Real Madrid moved to Valdebebas in 2005, it is a site which is very much still under construction. Described by developers as much more city, Real Madrid occupy less than a quarter of the site as a whole, where businesses, hotels, and thousands of homes and apartments, some of them priced at in excess of 2 million euros, and fit even for a Real Madrid first-team player, continue to be built to the north and east of Real Madrid's enormous training complex. Every few minutes, planes fly overhead. The so-called Real Madrid City is located less than 2 miles from Madrid-Barajas Airport, which is the busiest airport in Spain and the 5th busiest in Europe. When the site opened, Florentino Perez is said to have declared, quote, "If Real Madrid is universal, this will be its capital. A city open to anyone. A football dream. The Real Madrid City." End quote. Just to be clear though, it is semi-gated, and you will need permission to be let into any of the main buildings. Recently, there have been talks to rename the entire complex the Florentino Perez Sports City, which would make Perez a bit like one of those tin pot dictators who names the nation's capital after themselves, as per his own analogy. Nonetheless, it is hugely impressive, and it does feel like a city unto itself, albeit a rather lonely city right now, until more developments have been erected. The decision to move to Valdebebas was once a controversial one. Real Madrid's former training ground and academy centre, Ciudad Deportiva, or Sports City, had been their spiritual home since 1963. Located on the outskirts of Madrid when it first opened, under President Santiago Bernabeu, much like the club's new premises in Valdebebas, as Spain's capital city grew, Sports City was rapidly swallowed up by Madrid's new financial district, thus massively increasing the value of the land in which it was based. During the 1990s, confronted with massive debts, the possibility of selling the land and moving somewhere cheaper became a contentious talking point. And after he was elected president upon a promise to sign Luis Figo, Florentino Perez put the controversial plans into action. Madrid's parliament rezoned the area, which was snapped up by 4 large corporations who built 4 skyscrapers on the land, and Real Madrid received €480 million in return. It cost less than a quarter of that, €100 million, to build Ciudad Real Madrid about 5 miles away in Valdebebas, which is 10 times larger than Madrid's former headquarters. The main building at Real Madrid City, which winds its way through the complex, is ordered by age group. The first door that you see when you enter is the dressing room for the club's youngest age group, the under-5s, and so it progresses from there. The layout, as well as being practical, is supposed to be metaphorical. The first door is the first step to pulling on the famous white shirt of Real Madrid and stepping out in front of 80,000 fans at the Santiago Bernabeu. Things start to get serious when you step up from the infantile A and B teams to the cadet A and B teams at around the age of 13, which is reflected at Real Madrid City as the decor changes from yellow to blue from the younger to older age groups. From cadet A and B, the next step is Real Madrid Juvenil, a group of 3 teams, Juvenil A, B and C, covering ages 15 to 19, just one step below Real Madrid Castilla. World Cup winning former Real Madrid fullback Alvaro Arbeloa captains the A team. Meanwhile, Castilla have been coached by Real Madrid legend Raúl since 2019. Real Madrid's all-time record appearance holder and highest scorer until Cristiano Ronaldo and Karim Benzema came along, Raúl scored 16 goals in only 9 games for Real Madrid's C team during the mid-1990s, but he only had time to make 1 appearance for Castilla, who he now manages, before being drafted straight into the first team. Raúl is probably the second most recent world-class player, after Casillas, to have stepped up from La Fábrica to the Real Madrid first team without a loan move or being sold and bought back at a later date first. He knows better than anyone just how difficult it is for academy players to get first-team opportunities at Real Madrid, following 16 years in the club's first team himself, during which time only a handful of players followed in his footsteps, and having been part of Madrid's youth team setup for the last 5 years. Even Raúl only ended up becoming a Real Madrid player and a successful youth graduate by a bizarre twist of fate. Though he was born and raised in the Spanish capital, Raúl was actually playing in Atletico Madrid's youth team at the age of 15, when Atletico, in their eternal wisdom, decided to shut down their academy as a cost-cutting measure. 2 years later, Raúl became Real Madrid's youngest player of all time, and he went on to score 323 goals in 741 games for the club. Still, at least Atletico saved a few quid. The reality, however, is that since moving to their new home in 2005, only a handful of players have navigated every corridor and age group at Real Madrid City, all the way up to the first team, and none have found anything like the kind of stardom Raúl enjoyed when they got there. When you look at the way in which Real Madrid functions, in terms of the monster that the club is and the machinery of it as an operation, that is partly through the nature of the club and partly through design. Real Madrid is a football club with expectations like no other in the world. Of course, there are lots of enormous football clubs where fans demand a lot of their players, whether that be Manchester United, Bayern Munich or Juventus, but none are as expectant as supporters at the Santiago Bernabeu. It is hard to believe that at any other club, Cristiano Ronaldo, during his penultimate season, having averaged better than a goal a game and en route to a third Champions League crown in only 4 seasons, would be booed by his own supporters following a couple of wayward shots. In the 2016-17 season, Ronaldo responded to being booed by his own fans by scoring a hat-trick against Bayern Munich in the Champions League, and in his post-match press conference, he told reporters, quote, "I'm not asking them to name streets after me. The only thing that I ask is that they don't boo me here. I want them to stop booing me because I always give my best, and even when I don't score, I try to help Real Madrid." End quote. His manager, Zinedine Zidane, well acquainted with the lofty expectations at Los Blancos, adopted a more conciliatory tone, stating, quote, "Perhaps the fans won't boo him anymore, but this is the Bernabeu, and it can happen from time to time, and he knows that." End quote. Zizou knew better than to think that he could change the culture of Real Madrid 16 years after joining the club for a world record-breaking fee from Juventus. Zidane himself was whistled and jeered by Real Madrid fans on occasion, as were fellow club legends Emiliano Butragueño, Iker Casillas, Ronaldo Nazario, and Raúl on various different instances. Gareth Bale played over 250 games for Real Madrid, winning 15 trophies, including 5 UEFA Champions League titles, and played a pivotal role in several finals, but that still didn't stop him from becoming subject to a barrage of abuse and a relentless campaign of hate throughout much of his time at the club. Bale wasn't just booed, routinely, by Real Madrid fans. Some went as far as to accost and shout abuse at him at the club's training ground, and even to attack his car. This is not, oftentimes at least, the easiest environment for young players to be thrown into, even those who have grown up around the club. Typically, it takes time for young players to adjust to the step up in class from youth team or, in the case of Castilla, third-tier football, to playing and competing at the highest level, but you don't get time at Real Madrid. It is sink or swim. It's often noted at Barcelona, and drummed into people, that the club's most successful eras have been built around a talented core of La Masia graduates who are grounded in the Barcelona philosophy. There is obviously still a big step up in quality to the first team, but the expectations of them, in terms of what to do and how to play the game, remain virtually unchanged. There is a sense of familiarity, therefore, when a young player at Barca is thrown in at the deep end, because the first team plays with the same style, rhythm, and typically formation as the youth teams. Because of that understanding of Barcelona's history and the attachment to La Masia as an institution, fans tend to be much more lenient with La Masia graduates and forgiving of any teething problems that they might have in the first team. Sergio Roberto, for instance, particularly during his early years, could get away with a lot more than a €100 million plus signing like Antoine Griezmann or Philippe Coutinho. In fact, not only is there a greater appreciation of the club's homegrown players, there is an expectation and demand on managers to give those players first-team opportunities. Barcelona would never appoint Jose Mourinho or Carlo Ancelotti unless they made sufficient concessions to give La Masia graduates opportunities. The same ethos just doesn't exist at Real Madrid. By contrast, managers know that a few bad results at the Bernabeu typically means that their head will be on the block, and they are therefore extremely risk-averse when it comes to playing young players, homegrown or otherwise. Since Carlo Ancelotti's return to the Santiago Bernabeu over 2 years ago now, only 5 academy graduates have made their La Liga debuts for Real Madrid, and they have played a combined total of 13 league games between them. That's an average of barely 2.5 games each, consisting primarily of late substitute appearances, and 2 of them have already been sold. Over the exact same period, 15 La Masia graduates have made their La Liga debuts for Barcelona. Between them, they have made a combined total of 186 league appearances. Gavi, Alejandro Balde, and Lamine Yamal are all now key members of the Barcelona first team and full Spanish internationals. The gulf between the two La Liga giants in this regard could hardly be more stark. Unlike Barcelona, Real Madrid don't have a decades-long grounding and distinct idea of how the game should be played. Their only philosophy is winning, and whichever players the head coach at any one time feels will best help him achieve that goal and remain in the job in the short term are the ones who will play. From Mourinho and Benitez to Ancelotti and Zidane, Real Madrid routinely chop and change their style, making it impossible for La Fábrica to implement anything like a consistent uniform approach for every age group that would last more than a few years. In fact, Real Madrid's approach is almost diametrically opposed to the ideals of La Masia. Whereas Barcelona's youth ranks are finely tuned to churn out very Barca-specific players who can step into the first team, where the most talented among them often flourish, La Fábrica aims to create what it calls global players. That is to say, players who could play in any system for any club in the world. The idea of the global player suits Real Madrid, not just because they have no fixed style and therefore no specific ideology that they wish to implant upon their young players to prepare them for first-team football, but primarily because they are typically not preparing players for first-team football at Real Madrid at all. Which brings us to the element of design that I mentioned earlier on. Real Madrid's academy might not produce many Real Madrid players and virtually no world-class players anymore, but it produces an awful lot of players for other clubs. The reality of La Fábrica is that it is an academy system which primarily prepares players not to play for Real Madrid, but against them. There are more former La Fábrica players in La Liga and throughout Europe's top 5 leagues than there are players from arguably much more esteemed academies at Ajax, Manchester United, or Barcelona. Over the past 10 years, Real Madrid's academy players have fetched the club almost 400 million euros in sales, which isn't bad going for an academy, which costs around 25 million euros a year to run. It makes La Fábrica the second most lucrative academy in world football during that time, ahead of Ajax and Chelsea's youth ranks, and trailing only Benfica. The likes of Marcus Llorente, Sergio Reguilon, Jesse Rodriguez, Achraf Hakimi and Alvaro Morata have raised a small fortune for Los Blancos, constituting a key part of the club's broader business model, not unlike at Chelsea in recent years. For the most part, Real Madrid is happy for La Fábrica to function as a goldmine for the club on the outskirts of Madrid, printing money which can then be used to fund the acquisition of world-class youngsters and ready-made first-team players like Jude Bellingham, Aurelien Tchouameni, and Eduardo Camavinga, where there is a lot less risk involved. Real Madrid are largely unmoved, unlike a lot of clubs, by the sentimentality of locally born and bred players who have been nurtured by the club for years, stepping out onto the hallowed turf. It is a results business first and foremost at the Santiago Bernabeu, and if they have the choice of an unproven 19-year-old from La Fábrica or a proven 21-year-old from Monaco, that is not a hard decision as far as Real Madrid is concerned. In many ways, La Fábrica is the perfect nickname for Real Madrid's academy system. La Fábrica literally means the factory in English, and Real Madrid's academy is just that, a factory, churning out products to sell on for a profit. If, once in a generation, a Raúl or Iker Casillas crops up, who is good enough to step straight into the first team and perform at the age of 17 or 18, then fantastic. If, like Nacho or Lucas Vázquez, they are capable enough and content to act as squad players or rotation options, that is also convenient. But if you're not good enough at 19 or 20 to be any use to Real Madrid in the here and now, then, well, bye. In the words of Michael Corleone,
it's not personal, Sonny. It's strictly business.
In the last couple of years, there has been another, more specific problem when it comes to the development of youth team players at Real Madrid. In 2014, Real Madrid Castilla were relegated from the Segunda Division, and ever since, they have been competing in the third tier of Spanish football. The gulf between La Liga, and more specifically, playing for Real Madrid in La Liga, and the third tier of Spanish football, you won't be surprised to discover, is even greater than the gulf between Madrid and the second division. Over the last couple of years, therefore, Real Madrid have made a real push for promotion, but as of yet, to little avail. Last season, Raúl's side finished third in Group 1 of the Primera Federation before drawing 4-4 with Eldense over 2 legs in the promotion playoff final. With nothing to separate the two teams, it was Eldense who were promoted ahead of Castilla by virtue of having finished higher during the regular season. The push for promotion has seen Raúl turn increasingly towards more experienced Castilla players through fears of slip-ups and desperation to get the job done. It means, however, that not only are Real Madrid's first team focused primarily on short-term results, so too is Castilla, which ostensibly exists as a feeder club to serve the first team and develop players from the club's youth ranks. There is a risk versus reward in Real Madrid's eyes based upon the better quality and grounding that second-tier football would provide, but until they actually get there, all that's happening is that they are putting further possible youth developments on hold until they can supposedly develop those players at a higher level. What's more, supposing Castilla do finally win promotion this season, and they have won 1, lost 1 and drawn 1 of their opening 3 fixtures of the current campaign at the time of this recording, who is to say that the focus won't then turn to establishing themselves in the Segunda Division? Supposing Castilla find themselves towards the foot of the Segunda Division table, a not wholly unlikely prospect for a newly promoted club that won't have played at that level for at least a decade when there is only one other reserve team in Spain's second tier now, surely the temptation then will be to drop their youngsters, avoid risks, and halt development yet again. It should be noted at this point that Barcelona Athletic, Barcelona's B team, also compete in the third tier of Spanish football, and actually dropped into the fourth tier between 2018 and 2021. But that still didn't stop them from maintaining a pipeline of talent from La Masia to their first team that Real Madrid can only dream of. Of course, there is an element to which, and I am sure that plenty of Real Madrid fans would make this point, Barcelona are currently more dependent upon La Masia graduates than Real Madrid are on La Fábrica graduates because Real Madrid's finances are in a much healthier state than Barcelona's. That is a perfectly valid point, and La Fábrica is one of the reasons why Madrid's finances are still in relatively decent shape, but nevertheless, I shouldn't imagine that there are too many Los Blancos fans who would turn down the opportunity to add Gavi or Lamine Yamal to their squad. Real Madrid, contrary to popular opinion, haven't historically neglected their youth ranks. Several academy players were part of Real Madrid's early dominance of the European Cup, including Enrique Mateos, who played in 5 European Cup winning squads. In the 1966 final that Real Madrid won, likewise, 5 of their starting 11 were homegrown players, compared to just 1 when they won their most recent Champions League crown in 2022. It's not true, therefore, that there has never been close ties between La Fábrica's output and Real Madrid's first-team success, just as there has been between La Masia and Barcelona. It's just that those links haven't been canonised in the same way, they are slightly more historic, and they don't hold as much sway or importance in the consciousness of most Real Madrid fans, and certainly not in the minds of the club's hierarchy and Florentino Perez's. Perez is a man, however, who suffers from profound FOMO, that is, a fear of missing out for the over 45s there. Ever since Barcelona beat Real Madrid to the signing of Neymar, and he turned out to be just as good as his performances in Brazil suggested, Perez has signed virtually every Brazilian who even so much as looks like they might be half decent at football before they're even out of nappies. Real Madrid agreed a deal to sign Rodrigo for €45 million from Santos when he was just 17 years old, Jaime Jesus from Flamengo for €30 million the day after he turned 18, Vinicius Jr., also from Flamengo, for a fee of €46 million when he was 16, and soon those 3 will be joined by Endrick, possibly the most exciting prospect in all of Brazilian football, who Madrid agreed a deal to sign for €37.5 million from Palmeiras last December, when he too was just 16 years old. That's another reason why young players perhaps find it tricky to break into the Real Madrid first team, when they keep signing the best teenagers in Brazil for tens of millions of euros, but it's also illustrative of Perez's FOMO. That extends further to Real Madrid's own academy graduates. Whilst the club might be content getting rid of them, if they're offered a decent fee and they don't feel as though they are immediately ready for first-team football, they don't just wave goodbye and forget about them. Virtually every time that Real Madrid sell a La Fábrica graduate, or any young player for that matter, they insert a favourable buyback clause into their contract, and then they monitor them religiously for at least the next 5 or 6 years. The buyback clauses, not unlike La Fábrica as a whole, serve a dual purpose. Real Madrid trigger them not only when they think that a former player is now ready to step up and play first-team football for them, but also when they think that their true value has exceeded the value of their buyback clause. Omar Mascarell, for example, a defensive midfielder who came through the youth ranks at La Fábrica and made over 75 appearances for Castilla, was sold to Eintracht Frankfurt for €1 million in 2016. Madrid activated Mascarell's €4 million buyback clause in 2018, and on the very same day that they officially re-signed him, they sold him again to Schalke for €10 million. Madrid never wanted Mascarell back in their first team, of course. They just saw a very easy way of making €6 million in less than 24 hours. Even Dani Carvajal, Real Madrid's most impactful and successful academy graduate of at least the past decade, was initially sold to Bayer Leverkusen before he'd even played a game for Madrid, before his €6.5 million release clause was activated after just a single season in the Bundesliga. He has since made almost 400 appearances back at the Bernabeu. Fellow fullback Fran Garcia, who was brought back to the Bernabeu from Vallecano after his €5 million buyback clause was activated this summer at the age of 24, will be hoping to follow in his footsteps. Carvajal, incidentally, was responsible for the inauguration of Real Madrid City in 2005, along with Madrid legend Alfredo Di Stefano when he was just 13 years old. At the time, Carvajal could look up to the likes of Raúl, Casillas, Guti, Borja Fernandez, Raúl Bravo, Francisco Pavón, Alvaro Maya, Alvaro Arbeloa, Miguel Palencia, Ruben de la Red, Juan Fran, and Javi Garcia all in the first-team squad, and see that there was a clear pathway from yellow to blue at Real Madrid City, and eventually opportunities in the first team. That is 12 players, so basically half of Real Madrid's squad at the time, including 3 bona fide club legends. The last time that a Real Madrid icon like Raúl, Casillas or Guti stepped up to the first team, none of La Fábrica's almost 300 hopefuls now had even been born yet. A fresh-faced 13-year-old at Real Madrid now would look up to the first team and see only Carvajal, Nacho, Lucas Vázquez and the recently returned Fran Garcia, only one of whom, Nacho, wasn't sold and bought back by the club. At the turn of the millennium, Florentino Perez promised to build a team of Zidanes and Pavons, referring to club record signing Zinedine Zidane, widely regarded as one of the best players in the world at the time, and Real Madrid's most promising academy graduate, Francisco Pavón, who was at that time expected to form the fulcrum of the Real Madrid defence for the next decade and beyond. Pavón could never quite live up to being somewhat unfortunately lumped in with Zinedine Zidane when he was barely 20 years old. By the age of 27, Pavón was playing for Real Zaragoza, with whom he was relegated in his debut campaign, and at 31 he retired. Perez is still the commander-in-chief at Real Madrid, but there hasn't been talk of Zidanes and Pavons, or anything even vaguely resembling it, for a very long time. La Fábrica is no longer there to cultivate talent capable of starting games for Real Madrid and being mentioned in the same breath as Zinedine Zidane, but to provide the funds for Real Madrid to go out and buy the likes of Jude Bellingham and Vinicius Jr. It is a methodical assembly line churning out more good players than any other academy in the world, but very few truly great ones. That is it for today's video, but thank you all very much as ever for watching. Hit the like button if you enjoyed it, Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, and of course, it goes without saying, make sure that you're subscribed and have notifications turned on for both this channel, HITC Sevens, and my second channel, Alfie Potshammer, both of which should be on your screens now, along with a couple of videos that you might enjoy watching after this one. You can also find me on either Instagram or Twitter via the username @HITC Sevens on both, should you wish to do so, and all of those links plus a whole lot more are linked down in the video description below.